Good evening. On behalf of the Likely Story Bookstore and Carroll County Public Library, welcome To Be Read. Please be sure to type any of your comments and questions in the chat window. We'll get to as many as possible after the program. Everyone here tonight will also be entered to win all of Stephanie's books here and Karen's new upcoming book, The Last Night in London. If you haven't ordered or picked up your copy of Women of Chateau Lafayette, you can still order it through a Likely Story, as well as pre-order Karen White's upcoming novel or any of their other previous works. We are so excited tonight to be part of this special evening. The wonderful author and good friend and supporter of a Likely Story, Stephanie Dray's launch event for the Women of Chateau Lafayette. We cannot be happier for Stephanie and feel very blessed to have her here tonight in conversation with the fabulous Karen White. Stephanie Dray is a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today bestselling author of historical women's fiction. Her award-winning work has been translated into 8 languages and tops the list for the most anticipated reads of the year. She lives right here in Maryland with her husband, cats, and of course her history books. She's written 7 novels, short stories, novelettes, and she is one of the H-Team Novels authors of Ribbons of Scarlet. Stephanie will be in conversation with New York Times and USA Today bestselling author Karen White. Karen is the author of over 28 novels, including one of our staff pick favorites, All the Ways We Say Goodbye, The Trot Street, and Flight Patterns. Karen has a new novel coming out this April, The Last Night in London. Be sure to pre-order it with a Likely Story as soon as possible. Thank you so much for being here tonight, both of you. Congratulations, Stephanie, on this wonderful release, which as you have said, I believe it's your labor of love. And I'll turn it over to both of you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. Thank you for you and other independent booksellers who have really pulled through for authors during the pandemic and have made events like this possible. So my hat's off to you. I know Stephanie feels the same way. But this is all about Stephanie tonight and her amazing new book. Y'all just have to see it in person. This is, I mean, I can't wait. I mean, I've read it, so I can put it on my bookshelf now, but I just cannot wait to, I mean, this will look beautiful on my bookshelf because it's just so gorgeously done. But the book inside is just as gorgeous. So I know I got to read in advance. Y'all haven't, so I'm not going to give anything away. But I did want to talk to Stephanie a little bit about the book and some questions and comments that I had that, you know, kind of. But first of all, to just let you know, this is about. It's about really strong women. And there's a wonderful quote that Stephanie puts in, I can't remember where I read it, but the castle was named after, you know, men built the castle or protected the castle, and women protected the castle. But it's, you know, it's just the power of women and in times when women were not given any power, and how they were able to embody that. It's just, I mean, this is the perfect book for, you know, Women's History Month, because this is about women's history. There are 3 different time periods, 2 very real women. And I loved reading about the wife of the Marquis de Lafayette. Just because obviously we know about Lafayette. I didn't know he was a redhead, by the way. And I have to tell my husband, because I married a redhead. But I never knew about Adrienne, his wife, and what she did. You know, I'm humbled and amazed at this amazing woman. And I thank you for teaching me, you know, about who she was and what she did. And then we have, you know, this Beatrice Chandler, same thing. You don't expect her to step out of her very comfortable life and make, you know, risk her own life to do really amazing things and save so many Jewish children during World War II. And then we do have World War I. And then we have World War II, Marta. Is that's how we're saying it?
That's right.
Who's your only fictional character, but she's pulled from real people and you use a lot of real stories, the real impactful parts of her character were from real people. And so it felt like, she was a composite, but that was a composite of amazingly strong women who did miraculous things during World War II. And so my main question is, because I know you visited, I read your foreword. I know you went there. So this is a thick book. How long did it take you to write it? When did you start? And how did the pandemic, affect the whole research?
But that is a great question. So I started this book a really long time ago. It was 7 years in the making. Now, that doesn't mean I was only working on this book. I was writing other books. And as you know, we're usually researching one book and writing another book and then promoting a third book. So it might have taken a shorter time if it was my sole focus. But I did have a lot of research to do, and I had never written in World War I or World War II before. So I had to get up to speed on those time periods as well. And visiting the chateau really helped cement all of that for me. And I went in 2017. What really slowed things down for me, though, is that I wrote this story approximately 3 times. And the reason for that is Beatrice Chandler, that rascally lady. I first thought her story was about a very well-heeled society maven who dedicated herself to philanthropy and whose troubled marriage somehow was strengthened by the Great War. We all know that story, so that's the story I wrote. And then I went to the New York Historical Society, at which I discovered a packet of letters, love letters. And once I decoded them, I realized I had discovered a century-old secret love affair, and that everything I thought about Beatrice's marriage was wrong. So now I thought, well, this isn't too bad. I know this story too. This is about a woman who's discontent in her marriage, and she finds love with a French officer, but ultimately through the war, she finds herself. Okay, so I wrote that story. And then I got a call from Beatrice's grandson, who had been consulting with me on this novel. And he said, I have discovered that my grandmother was not even who she said she was. In fact, she was a greater heroine than anyone knew, but this meant rewriting the story again. So it took a lot longer than I expected. And so I was still writing and editing during the pandemic. And it hit me right around the time when I was doing the final editing round. And I think that the story, I didn't have to go anywhere else to do any more research. But I think, much like Lauren Willig has talked about this, that it really gets in your head what's going on in the pandemic and then what's going on in the page. Mm-hmm. In some respects, what was happening on the page was dark and I was feeling dark, so that's reflected there. But in other ways, it was sort of perfect for me to have because it made me feel hopeful. I thought, well, what we're going through is tough, but there have been tough times before, tougher times, in fact. And these women got through it. They found their best selves and they brought out the best in others. So hopefully this will help readers feel as encouraged as it made me. And so that's how the pandemic affected it.
Wow. No. So I'm so glad you got in that research trip. And just a little aside, when I was researching one of my own books set in Georgetown, South Carolina, which you might recognize the name of that town, I was walking down the main thoroughfare and there was a statue, a bronze bust of the Marquis de Lafayette. Because where did the Marquis land when he first arrived on American soil? Georgetown, South Carolina, which, it's a small, beautiful little town, but that's sort of it's one of those little tidbits that's lost to history. And you touched on it in the book and I love that. So let's start with Lafayette. Okay. So I fell in love with him, not just because he's a redhead, but he was this sort of like country yokel sent to the French court. His father-in-law was like, who is this? But his wife, but it was a love match in many ways. And so, and as a guy, I mean, the sacrifices that his wife made to support him, to be with him were, I don't know if I could do that. I mean, she sacrificed her life, her health and her life. And so I have to ask, what was it like? Because I know from reading the forward and going to your website, which everybody, you need to go to stephaniedray.com. You need to go. There are lots of great background stuff in there. You need to check it out. But you saw there was so much left of Adrienne in her own hand, letters, and what did it feel like, and where did you find these letters? And I mean, how did it feel to see this amazing woman's letters and reading her words and understanding how she felt?
So the extant letters that remain from Adrienne, I believe, are still kept in their castle outside of Paris. He has 2 castles. This is just about his castle. The other one would really belong to her. And so I wasn't able to see the actual letters, but they are reprinted in a biography of hers. And so I loved being able to see what she wrote to him. And usually it was lovely and loving, but every now and then she would slip in that sort of wifely irritation when she was doing business for him and he was getting impatient. So that was always fun to see, the sort of reality of married life, even in the 18th century. What really moved me about seeing her things is at Chauvignac, they have her apartments and they've reproduced them. And she lived pretty simply in her apartments, but I was really touched by the fact that she kept a little game board in her room because she wanted her children to play near her. And that's very unusual for a woman of her time period. So she was really dedicated to her children, as well as Lafayette, who I agree with you, he's easy to love. He might be the easiest founding father to love, the least problematic, most lovable, America's favorite founding friend, or favorite fighting Frenchman, also founding Frenchman.
No, and their love story, it was very dear, and they were married. She did. How old was she when she died?
She was in her 50s. She's not very old. They had been married, I want to say 34 years.
Something like that. I remember from, yeah.
Yeah. And he had more to do. He lived on. But something that I really wasn't able to get in the book, but which still moves me when I think about it, is that he carried a token of her around with him for the rest of his life that was engraved with the last word she spoke, which was, "I am all yours." And every morning for the rest of his life, he spent 15 minutes in dedication to her. And I'm moved by that because she would have really liked for him to have spent 15 minutes in prayer.
Yeah.
But he never really became a believer. So he translated that dedication to her memory, which just kills me.
I know that's beautiful, but I know it, and I wanted to question that because her faith was very strong. It is what got her through the most dreadful of times that I'm just amazed, and that she didn't force her husband or tell him he should, but I think she had faith strong enough for both of them. So did he ever make it back to America after the French Revolution?
He did. He returned to America in 1824 for a farewell tour. He visited all the new states. He was feted like he was a boy band star. There were women just passing out on the floor in front of him. I have a set of reproduction plates that they made, commemorative plates of every place he went. Wow. He gave Thomas Jefferson the business while he was here about slavery. Okay. And one of the things that actually led me to Adrienne's story is that when Lafayette was here, most of his revolutionary comrades had already passed on because he was very young. He was only 19 when he became a major general in our war. So what he did when he came back is he started checking on the widows and daughters of his fallen comrades. And almost alone amongst our founding fathers did he show such concern over the families of the people that he'd fought for. Right. And I thought, what kind of women are in his life that give him this care and concern? And that led me to Adrienne. And Adrienne is the most courageous heroine I've written about, maybe read about, as a real historic figure. And I agree with you. I don't know that I could do it. She really humbled me.
Yeah, no, truly. And very strong daughters as well. Does he have any descendants living in the United States?
He does have descendants. I don't think they're living in the United States. That's a very good question. And I'm going to ask it of the American Friends of Lafayette Society, of which I am now a lifetime member.
Yay! You deserve to be.
They know everything, and I want to find out from them.
Good. Yeah, I'm curious. And one last thing before we move on to Beatrice, but I know Adrienne, when her husband was imprisoned, wrongly imprisoned and sorely treated, she wrote to George Washington asking for his help. And he was just, oh, sorry, can't help you. And, I've always been a fan of George Washington. My daughter actually has a crush on George Washington. She actually has a sketch of him in her bedroom. And she did her thesis on his stables at Mount Vernon and has volunteered at Mount Vernon. So George Washington is near and dear to her heart. But George Washington was like, no, I can't help you. Good luck with that. And why do you think that was?
When I was writing this, I was very frustrated with George Washington because I felt like he invented thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers. Hope everything's well over there for you. I think if you look at it from Washington's point of view and Alexander Hamilton's point of view, they both loved Lafayette deeply, but the United States was still a very fragile nation, and they were very worried about getting involved in another fight that might topple the country. So their personal affection could not overcome their worry for the nation, which, is probably probably what you want in a president. Right. On a personal level, though, I'm sure Adrienne was none too pleased and thought that he was being a serious ingrate. Right. What I will say is that the Hamiltons did take in Lafayette's son for a time,
George,
in the United States, and they did so a little bit secretly so that France wouldn't get angry at them. But they did try to help, and ultimately Lafayette's life and also Adrienne's life were saved because of the United States.
Right. Okay. So I know I was just a little annoyed. Okay. Let's move on to our second heroine. We have Beatrice Chandler. How did you meet her and know that she had to be in this book?
Well, I wasn't so sure at first that she had to be in this book, but Beatrice muscled her way in. She told me that this was her story, that this was her castle that she purchased and renovated, and that she was the connective tissue between Lafayette and the World War II story. Mm-hmm. She's also so fascinating and funny. She's very funny in her letters. And so this had the potential to be a pretty grim book without Beatrice's sparkling wit. So I was really happy to include her. And I had so much fun using her dialogue from her letters that her family kindly allowed me to see and use. So that's all Beatrice's fault.
Right. And that was amazing. I know you connected with her grandson.
Yes.
And I mean, oh my gosh, that must have been like, that is a writer's dream to be able to really get from the fountain of knowledge, and for him to share everything with you. But again, reading, it was either on your website or in the forward, how you had discovered those letters in the big heart. You were at the New York Archival or
the New York Historical Society.
Right. And you found these letters because I wanted to know, and I emailed you because, and I'm going to tell readers now, you are going to want to Google these people to find out if they were real and or if they survived and if, what happened to them. Don't do that. It's like reading the last page of a book. You don't want to do that. So because I was very curious about Beatrice. I did want to know what she looked like. So I did. She was a gorgeous woman. A lot of times when they say people were beautiful back in the day, you look at the pictures, you're like, maybe, but not by today's standards. But no, this woman was truly beautiful. And in every picture, there's not a bad picture of her. But there is a character that she meets, Maxime, and a French officer. And, again, I'm having, heart palpitations reading about him because he's so gallant and brave and strong and kind and loves her children. And I wanted him to be real. And I was happy to find out that he was real. So tell us about those letters that you discovered.
So one of the joys of this project was working with Beatrice's grandson, who is just a wonderful person, a kind man, and has become a good friend. We've gone through quite a journey together in writing this book. And the letters that he first sent me, some of them were very puzzling. We usually knew who Beatrice was talking about, but occasionally she would refer to someone named Kate, and we had no idea who Kate was. So when I found these letters in her papers, they were not addressed to her, and I didn't know that if they even were for her, but they were talking about how much he was in love with her and how much he wished to be worthy of her and so on. And then he speaks of himself almost as Catherine. And I started wondering, that couldn't be Kate, could it? No, is this a code? And he does say that they have to be careful of the censors. So I started going back through all her letters again. And then I noticed that at least in one instance, she had put Kate in quotes. So I knew she was playing around. And then when I laid the letters side by side and put them together chronologically, that's when I discovered, okay, this is who she's talking about. This is who she's talking to. It all lines up chronologically. Oh my God, I just found a secret love affair.
Oh my gosh. Did you scream? I did.
And then I felt really stupid because I thought, I've been reading these letters for months thinking like, who's Kate? And going through every woman that could possibly be, it never occurred to me that it was a man that she was corresponding with.
Right. And I want to talk about their relationship, but I don't want to give anything away. So I'm thinking my next question I need to not ask because I really don't want to ruin it. But that is one of the things I looked up because I was very, very curious. So her marriage was it was advantageous. She married, a Knickerbocker fan she was she didn't know who her father was. Her mother was an Irish immigrant, very impoverished. She took her, the man her mother was living with was a butcher. She may have assumed he was her father, so she took his last name. So those are incredibly humble beginnings. No formal education until some wealthy Frenchman took pity on her and paid for dancing lessons. So by 12, she was on the stage. And from that, and a lot of women would just their goal would be to marry well and then just have a life of leisure and luxury for the rest of their lives. But this is why Beatrice is such an incredible heroine, because that wasn't enough. She needed to do something. And she did more than just do something. She made a major impact on, she was the one that was sending, Lafayette kits, to the soldiers at the front to give them, socks and, things that they needed long before America was in the war. And then, pressured the president, hey, Lusitania got sunk. We need to be in this war, and it was brilliant. And she just kept giving and giving and giving. She crossed the Atlantic more times than any other war worker, and she received a lot of prestigious honors that had previously only been given to men. And there's a famous, which apparently is true, where when one of her ships was torpedoed, she was in the bath and just didn't want to be bothered with getting out. Truly a remarkable character. And what else did you find out about her, and what made you decide to use her as the linchpin between the World War I part and the World War II part?
So here's a little insider baseball for everyone. I originally thought that Emily Sloan and Anne, her daughter Anne, would be the mother and daughter pair that would see us through the story. But as I started researching, I realized that I couldn't quite pin them down. I couldn't get enough information from the family, and I wasn't really sure about what their roles would have been. Beatrice, though, was very obvious, and I had lots of resources for her. And I don't want to give short shrift to Emily Sloan, because she was also a remarkable lady. But Beatrice was a complete polymath. Like, you almost don't believe how many things she was involved with or did. She was an actress, she was a sculptress, and she was good at all of these things. She was an author. In fact, her first book was a biography of Cleopatra's daughter, which coincidentally or spookily is the book that helped start my career, because I wrote Lily of the Nile, which was also based on Cleopatra's daughter. Beatrice was an activist. She kept going until her dying day. She just never stopped. She helped in all the wars. She influenced policy. And so I don't think there are that many people in the world like that. She's a Renaissance woman. We don't often find that sort of person. So how could I not write about her? She's very exciting.
I love that she was really fearless. There was nothing, the word can't just didn't exist in her vocabulary. And I think that is the epitome of a strong woman. She had lots of charm. I think that's how she did get her way many, many, many times. But she never took no for an answer. This was like, we're going to do this. I'm not going to listen to what they're saying I cannot do because I'm a woman or because I'm not educated properly or whatever. She just did it. And the woman was remarkable. And I'm sad that she only had 66 years, because I think she probably could have even given even more to the world than she had. But she did. I mean, she saved so many people. And World War I and World War II, just keeping that chateau alive. So I have to ask, is the chateau still working as a preventorium?
It's no longer working as a preventorium, in part because now we have penicillin. So they don't need that particular kind of facility for tuberculosis anymore. Although I must say, during the pandemic, some of the things that I learned about from the preventorium were applicable now. I remember thinking, what about those UVC lights that they use? Turns out that that's still effective.
Wow.
But they have closed the preventorium part, and now it is a museum.
Okay. So if we wanted to go,
and you should
visit.
Yes.
Okay. And honestly, that's going to be, I was supposed to go to France last year. So that needs to be on my bucket list, because now I just have to see where these people lived and walked and worked and saved lives. I want to see are you allowed to go into the secret passages?
So when I went, I was not allowed in the secret passages. I think that there might have been a language barrier. Maybe I wasn't communicating correctly, because they weren't able to show me. But I was able to confirm that these tunnels existed, because when I came to New York City to look at Beatrice's papers, she had pictures that she had helpfully labeled secret tunnels.
Oh, love it.
So I know that they're there, and I've since talked to some villagers who have confirmed that they're there, and maybe they will open them up now that they know there'll be some interest in them.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. So let's go to our third heroine, who again is a composite of many people. And, she is an orphan. She is unsure of her lineage, you know, who she is, who her mother is, who her father is. She thinks who it may be because she sees pictures. And I kind of wanted it to be who we think it is in the beginning. But in the end, we realized that it doesn't have to be. You know, she's one of Lafayette's children, I guess, because she is raised in this a beautiful castle that was Lafayette's home. Again, a woman who sacrifices so much, you know, and is willing to sacrifice her life for strangers. And I have to say, one of the things that I loved the most about her story was very unexpected. And I wanted to ask you, because, you know, I have the writer's mind, and I know how sometimes I start writing a character and then they take this curve and I'm like, wait, I didn't expect that person to behave that way. So I'm speaking about I say Trevor. Is it Travers? In French, sorry. Remember, I speak fluent franglais. I do not speak French.
Right with you.
Yeah. And so here's this gendarme who we think is probably working with the Vichy government and then the Nazis, because, you know, he's this beefy kind of guy, and you think, oh, you know, and Marta hates him. And then I think at the end, he is like one of my favorite characters. So I have to ask, did you intend that, or did he just sort of become that character?
He did that. Your writer instincts are on. I had not planned that. And then somewhere in the middle, I thought, I'm thinking about this person in the entirely wrong way. Mm-hmm. And I did make that decision very early on in the process. But yes, he was not the way I expected. And that's one of my favorite things to happen in a book, when something turns around like that.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? I know, and you did such a great job with that. I'm trying to think if there's something that I did not. Oh, and here's something, and again, it's a quote from you. And I know you were talking about Beatrice, but I think this is applicable to Adrienne, Beatrice, and Marta. They weren't an agent of Lafayette's legacy. They were its embodiment. And, you know, Lafayette didn't want power, kind of like George Washington, you know, how he didn't want power. He wanted freedom for the people, for them to make their own choices, to live their own lives. And it's very poignant how he was then imprisoned for, you know, the same revolution. But and Washington was the same way. Like, he didn't want to be president. He just wanted to go live on Mount Vernon, and then they made him this, you know, this icon. But I think these women show that, you know, it's always, you know, they always say, if you want to see, you know, a powerful man, look behind him and there's a woman, you know, kind of like helping him along. But these women didn't really need their men to do it. They kind of did their own thing. So sorry, I just wanted to bring that up again. I'm trying to think if there's something else about Marta that you wanted to talk about, like where did you get her influences from?
Mm-hmm. So this is a great question, because I knew, well, let me back up just a little bit and talk about how I came to the story. So I was originally going to write about Adrienne Lafayette, our French founding mother. I was very excited to tell that story. And then I discovered a memoir from a woman named Giselle Feldman, who was a survivor of the Holocaust. And she was one of the children who had been hidden at the chateau. Mm-hmm. And the memoir is called Saved by the Spirit of Lafayette. Mm. Beautiful title. Mm-hmm. And her reverence of his legacy, that it meant something enormous to her as a child 200 years later, mm-hmm. that she associated his legacy and the continuity of that legacy with her survival. Wow. And her religious freedom really moved me. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I had to tell that story, that Lafayette's legacy, this is the most beautiful thing about Lafayette's legacy, or maybe how anybody's legacy, is if other people can be a part of your legacy, then it's more than about just you. Right. And Lafayette has invited generation after generation to carry the torch of self-determination. He lets us know that democracy is fragile. It has to be fought for every generation. And I just picked 3 times when it was the most imperiled, and it happened to be preserved in and around his chateau in part. So when I read her memoir and how much it meant to her, then it meant more to me, and I had to find a way of portraying that. Unfortunately, she was a little girl and she was frightened, and she did not know which of the administrators was on her side or not. She knew the doctor was helpful and she knew the priest, but she could not name the other people at the castle who helped her, and in one case at least did not help, tried to turn them in. So I felt very uncomfortable choosing a real historical person, because what if they were a collaborator and I got it wrong? Or what if they were actually a hero and I portrayed them as a collaborator? This is very recent history. I wouldn't feel so bad if it was ancient history or maybe even a couple hundred years ago, but there are people still alive from this time. So I felt like I had to fictionalize a woman who was in the resistance, and I wanted to honor all the forgers that were in France that helped children survive. Another book that's been out recently by Kristen Harmel is also about forgers in France. And I knew there was an artist in residence at Chavignac, and I knew that there was a teacher in the castle who was part of the French resistance, or who helped hide the French resistors. But again, we didn't know her name. So that's how Marta came to be. I knew I was going to have to come up with a fictional character. And I found a photograph of children at the chateau, and one of them was a girl in blonde braids, and she's the only girl in a classroom of boys, and she's looking right at the camera with challenge in her eyes. And I thought, that's my girl. I wanted somebody who could be a contrast to the other 2 women. And Marta was a lot of fun to write because, of course, Adrian loves Lafayette and Beatrice loves Lafayette. And when the story starts, Marta could care less. She finds all of this just eye-rollingly bad. She's a cynic and she's out for herself. And so it takes some time for her to mature. But that's the sort of journey that we writers love.
Oh, absolutely. I loved her journey. I loved how she became, very, not just cynical, but just like, I don't care. It's like, I'm about survival. I need to survive here. And then she has, there are some, very real, the things that people, the losses and the grief that people in that period went through, she experiences. And, and it's all very real. There was something excuse me, this must be, maybe it's the wine. Maybe I should lay back on the wine. I just had an excellent question that just came to me about that whole period. But, I know what it was. So there's and I'm not going to be specific, but there was a scene where 2 very young boys who had been raised, who were in the Preventorium, who shoot 3 Gestapo, which, you don't get away with that. And then again, I'm reading that the way that they are punished is based on historical fact, which breaks my heart. But so tell me a little bit about how you found that and how you decided to put that in the book, because it's, and the whole, the cane whipping at the train station and all that, how that is very real and taken from a letter. I am flabbergasted, because we know Nazis are evil, but when you make it so personal like that, it's heartbreaking.
I found in very old gazettes of the American Friends of Lafayette, dating back to the Second World War, that Madame Leverrier she started giving her witness accounts of what she'd seen once the United States was able to resume contact with France after the war. And she names a couple of instances. And one of them is is a young German soldier who was beaten to death. Another one is some boys who were killed eating cherries by the side of the road. They were tricked with an ambulance. And
Oh, sorry, and sorry, the whole thing about how the Nazis were in the Red Cross ambulance.
Yes, that was true.
It's disgusting to me.
Mhm.
Shocking. Yeah.
Yep. And the thing that really stuck out to me that I had to get this in, even though I inserted this later, you know, we debated with the editor for a while, and I was like, this has to go in, is that the French resistance had a whole unit named after Lafayette. And they had this whole escapade surrounding his statue because the Nazis were going to melt it down.
Right. I love that. Yes.
And the French resistance was not going to let that happen without a fight. And I thought that was important to show that it isn't just sort of the more philanthropic aspects of Lafayette's legacy that have lasted, but also his willingness to fight. And,
Right.
and they were willing to fight.
And I love how Trevor, sorry, it's my French, says, you know, don't fight for it. It's just a heap of metal. And they're like, no, it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And so that really happened. That is taken from an actual account. That's brilliant. Love that. So moving forward, and this is, you know, we're, I mean, I'd love to talk about where you're working on next, but mostly I want to know, as a historian and as someone who is probably already deep in research for her next book, I have to ask about modern time. You know, like I just recently found a whole box of letters between my parents and me when I was in college, you know, handwritten, you know, like the old days. And it was so poignant to see the things that we talked about and just everyday stuff. And I'm always asking for money for some reason. But you know, I think about the historical records that you rely on now, like the letters from Adrian, the letters from Maxine, excuse me. You know, that Madame Leverrier, you know, her accounts in the Gazette, and just everything from letters. I mean, where are we now when everybody, it's just like they disappear, you know, they're Snapchatting, they're, you know, emailing, they're, you know, texting. Where is the historical record for people like you in 30 years?
You know, sometimes I think about this. On the one hand, we probably have far more conversation preserved because of email. But on the other hand, that's kind of transient, right? It's not on paper. It's easily deleted or lost or hacked.
And you don't see the hand. To me, it was like, my mother had, you know, she's from Southern Mississippi. She had the most beautiful handwriting. And my grandmother's, you know, beautiful handwriting. And I just, you know, it like connects you more when you see the handwriting on a piece of paper, as I'm sure, you know, it must do for you when you see letters from the people you're researching. Don't you feel that connection?
Oh, I do. And I'm sure you must have had this experience as well in your research. When I, you know, touched Beatrice's letters, I felt really emotional. I get very emotional very easily with historical things. You know, when I was in the castle, I had to have my husband hold the camera because I was shaking so much.
Oh, I know, because this isn't, when you write, like, I think what you do so well, Stephanie, when you write historical fiction, it's not about, I mean, you write about real people, dramatic events, but it's not about the dramatic events. It's about what's going around these very real people and how they react to them. And I think that's why all your books, but especially this one, it's just so readable. And how it just became like, once I got like to the middle of it, I'm like I told myself, I'm not Googling. I don't want to know. I just, you know, I just couldn't put it down. So kudos. This is truly a triumph. And I just cannot wait to see what you do next. But I think this book will do beautifully. And not just because of, I mean, come on, really, this is so incredibly beautiful. Everybody, you need this on your bookshelf. And yeah. And Stephanie, did you want to mention the little giveaway or
So I think Debbie's gonna.
We're going to be having a drawing, and with everybody who is here tonight across all the channels. And at the end, we're going to be, one of those people will win all of Stephanie sizes, because of course everybody's pre-ordered this already, right? And they're getting this already. But all of
You're
Stephanie's
putting on a bookshelf all together. Look at this.
yes, they're wonderful. And as well as Karen's new release that's coming out in April. So we will send you all the books as soon as Karen's come out on April 20th. Mm-hmm. And so look forward to that at the end. But we do have a bunch of questions. Are you ready for questions?
Mm-hmm. I'll sit back and drink my wine while Stephanie does all the heavy lifting.
There's actually some for you too, Karen. So
okay, all right.
So, well, first, Stephanie, this is from Danielle. She would like to know, which of the three women do you relate to the most, and which was the most difficult to write?
Good question.
So, I would love to say that I relate most to Adrienne, but that would be a lie, because she's far more heroic than I could ever imagine being. And she was just so good. She was such a goody-goody. I'm not capable of being that emotionally generous all the time. So I love her and I admire her, but I don't know that I could say I relate to her. Marta, definitely I have some of her cynicism and some of those characteristics. I mean, she tickled me. I liked how she had a hard edge, and then I could break her open and show that she really had a mushy inside. Mm-hmm. But Beatrice, I relate to Beatrice because she makes me laugh. She's audacious, and I think she's my spirit guide. She just leads me to stories and books whenever she pleases. My next novel, in fact, is going to be about America's very first female cabinet secretary, Frances Perkins.
Yay.
And almost within a day of my announcing this, I found out that Beatrice has a very strong connection with Frances Perkins, and so I'll be doing some more research with some more family members because of Beatrice. So I'm gonna name Beatrice as the person I relate to and my writing spirit guide.
Okay, good one. Good. I can't wait for that next book.
We have a couple actually that Karen, you were talking about referring to the foreword in the book, but there's some people who are reading the ebook version, which I don't know anything about, but they're asking if this is the same as the author's note, and usually it's not. Do you have any?
I think it is. I kept on calling it the foreword, but I started the book in an e version of the ARC, and then they sent me the actual book. So I read the actual book. So I don't remember where I read. Maybe it was the acknowledged. No, there's
the author's note.
It is the author's note.
Author's note, and it's at the back of the book. I do not know if it's in the ebook. I just got the advanced reader's copy in e-form, and then the final copy of the print book. So
right. I thought that, but I wasn't sure either.
I'm sorry. I kept on calling the wrong thing. I'm so sorry.
Okay. So in. A lot of people everybody's sending congratulations, and they're very happy for your birthday, for your book birthday. But many people are listening to the audio, and there's a really good question here about the audio, asking. It's a little different in that this is from Beth. She says, loving the audiobook, and I found it so interesting that there are multiple narrators. I don't hear that very often. Did you have a say in this? Did you listen to the audio? And I think it's hard if you have a voice in your head for somebody and then the narrator doesn't match that. How did you feel about that?
So this is a great question because I just started listening to the audio for the first time today.
That's very brave.
And it's always alarming because they'll read a phrase that maybe you heard in your head a little different, so it's startling. But then they're so good at what they do that then it just becomes the definitive way of how it should be said. Mm-hmm. I've had really good luck with narrators in this book so far. Tavia Gilbert's doing a great job as Beatrice, and I don't know why I'm blanking on the other names, but the French accents are a lot of fun. So I hope that you're loving the audiobooks. And Marta just comes across just as bratty as I intended her to be in the first chapters.
You had said about, who your spirit character is. Angie would like to know, though, which of the women's stories did you most enjoy writing, and which was the hardest?
I probably enjoyed writing Adrian's story the most because I had pretty clear guide of what I should write, in that we have lots of great biographies of both Lafayette and Adrian. And it's so dramatic. It's so operatic.
Absolutely.
By the time, she was at the foot of the guillotine, and
Seriously,
that was.
And then I was like, no, she can't.
I knew how everything turned out, but boy, was I upset while I was writing that. So those are always, the fun things to write. Marta came very quickly to me. She was the last narrative that I wrote. I did not write all three at the same time.
Okay.
I wrote them separately because I wanted to make sure I didn't get confused with slang or the time period. I wanted each voice to be very authentic and distinct. And then I wove them together later. I probably will never do that again. That was hard. And in fact, I'm going to need to take a class from Karen White and Lauren Willig and Beatrice Williams about how on earth they do this so effortlessly and beautifully.
Oh, thank you. It's not so effortlessly, and but yeah, we work at it. It's not easy.
Well, Arlene is asking, how deeply you inhabit your characters and the time period for the book, and does it make it hard to reorient yourself back to the present day? And that's for both of you, when you're doing this.
Karen, go ahead.
Yes, because most of my books are sort of, I have a big chunk in the contemporary, like now, 2000, the Last Night in London is, 1940 and 2019. And so, yeah, when I'm deep in that, the historical research, I'm, deep in that world. And then you look up and, you're texting and then you have to shift to the other, the other time period. And it's sort of like, when you travel into a different time zone, on a plane, and you get out and you're like, okay, wait, it's 2 hours early, where am I? And it's really funny because I think, Stephanie, from what I've heard you speak and from reading, I think we're both what actors call the not immersion actors, but where you become that character and you live their lives. And then you have to step away from it. And I know, like Vivian Lee, when she played Blanche in Streetcar Named Desire, like she actually had mental issues because she was playing a mentally ill person. She became mentally ill. And but I even find myself like speaking with an accent if I'm writing like, a British character. Did you find that?
So when I wrote America's First Daughter with my dear friend Laura Camoy, I started speaking with a Southern accent all the time. It was so, I'm a Yankee girl. This was just so
it's weird. But yeah, but I think that's why your voices come through so authentically, because you feel like you know them enough. You become that character. And so, yeah, but it makes it more fun too. And, to live, it's like being an actress. You step into the lives of somebody else. Yeah. While you're sitting in your comfortable office.
And I really think, at least for me, the most beautiful thing about historical fiction is that it's an exercise in empathy. Mm-hmm. For a while you're writing, you have to live in someone else's shoes, and maybe even somebody who's deeply flawed. Mm-hmm. And you have to see everything through their eyes, because mm-hmm. no one thinks they're the villain. Mm-hmm. Or at least very few people. And so you start having more compassion for people, or at least I do, and I try to. And so that is one of the deeply enriching things about writing in general, and writing historical fiction about real people in particular, that I enjoy.
Right. No, I was at a book club once where it was, I can't even remember what the story was. It might have been The Hiding Place by Carrie Ten Boom, true story. But I remember, someone in the book club was saying, well, anybody who didn't, protect Jewish citizens, well, they should all be whatever. And I'm like, you know what? if you knew that the Nazis, if they caught you, would kill not only you, but your children and your parents and your family and take everything. Can you really, sitting here in your comfortable home in the United States in 2021, can you really say that with complete, we would like to think we'd be brave like Adrienne Lafayette to go into prison with her husband? I would like to say we would, but I don't know. Until you are really tested with your feet in the fire, you don't know. And reading historical fiction like this, it lets you play that part for a little bit and to kind of test your mettle a little bit.
Beautifully said.
She's also wondering, and this is good for both of you as well, because you both have co-written books. What do you like about that experience? And is it easier or harder? Or is it kind of a combination? What is your favorite part of collaborating?
Stephanie, you go first.
Okay. So, I love writing solo novels because then I get to have everything my own way, right? Like, I don't have to compromise. I get to phrase everything the way I want. But it's also a lonely business, right? And nobody is excited about the history as you are while you're in it, and your spouse can only take so much. So when I'm writing with Laura, or I've co-written with Kate Quinn as well, when I'm writing with a partner, they're excited about it too. We both get to nerd out together. We also elevate each other's game, right? Because even in your drafts, you're like, I can't hand this in. I need to impress these ladies. It has to be my best. So you really,
absolutely.
You learn from them, and there's a great synergy that gets going. And you get some of that with critiques. And I've been very fortunate that I have great critique partners, and our fingerprints are all over each other's books. But the enthusiasm and the camaraderie of writing a book together and marketing a book together is a lot of fun. Very enjoyable.
And let's talk about the book tour. Book tour with friends who are authors. It's way much more fun than a single author.
And they're fun for the audience too.
Because you do. It's you have that play off of each other. And I will say that writing collaborations with Beatrice Williams and Lauren Willig is the most fun writing I've ever done. We just had this synergy together. We have what we call the unibrain. We tend to think alike. And it's just this magical, wonderful process. It's uplifting. It's creatively inspiring. It just is. And whenever we finish writing a book together, we're like, dear God, how can we ever write a book on our own ever again? Because this is so much more fun, because writing is a lonely business. Going on book tour by yourself is a lonely business. But when you have two writing partners, it's just so much more fun.
And it's good because you don't have to keep track of everything yourself. You have friends who have
exactly. Yes. Yeah. And if you have a question about this isn't working, you've plotted this book together with your two writing pals. They're like, oh, what about today? Lauren is writing her chapter. She's like, wait, what did we decide about XYZ? And both Beatrice and I are like, bing, 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 and we're just sort of plodding along on our text chains, and it's fabulous. She's like, great, thanks, got it, and off she goes. But because normally when you're by yourself, you're writing and you go, you think out loud to your dog, your cat, and you go, what if blah, blah, blah in the plot? And then you listen and all you hear are crickets. Well, when you're writing with a partner, you text, what if? And then you get this wonderful conversation of possibilities.
Stephanie, Anita would like to know if you are working on any collaborations with Kate or Laura. And for Karen, when is your next Team W collaboration?
Okay, go ahead, Stephanie.
Laura and I are planning to get together again after our solo novels. She is working on a book right now called Churchill's Spy Mistress, which is Vera Atkins, very exciting. And then we have already brainstormed some founding mothers. We kind of have a direction. It's just going to be a matter of which one strikes our fancy when we're ready. Kate and I don't have any immediate plans, but now you're giving me ideas. Maybe I should finger.
What you got? Um,
I'll give you a list. And for us, the next Teen W book will be out in the fall of 2022. We're currently working on it right now. We don't have a title, but it will be set in Newport, Rhode Island, and it will be during the Gilded Age, which is 1890s, 1950s, and modern day.
oh, nice.
Karen, if you're in Newport, is any part of it going to be set at the Chandler? Because there is a hotel, which was the house in Newport, that was Beatrice Chandler's husband's family's house.
Okay, well, because now that the three of us are getting our vaccinations, because last year we were supposed to go to Newport and do our research trip, and that had to be, put on the back burner. So we're planning to go. We're hoping to go. Maybe that's a place we need to stay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Harriet would like to know, Stephanie, you've done Egypt with Cleopatra, you've done American history with My Dear Hamilton and America's First Daughter, you've done France with Ribbons of Scarlet, and your new one, Women of Chateau Lafayette. Where are we going next?
We are coming back to America during the Great Depression. We're going to find out a lot about Francis Perkins' love and hate relationship with FDR. They both brought out the best in each other. He was a difficult person, but one that she admired greatly. And it's going to be really fun to write about them banging heads in private while they have to, put on a united front in public and save
That's almost modern day for you too, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
That's almost modern day for you.
Yes, that might be the most modern story.
Okay, so Tracy just popped up here. How do the ideas or inspirations come to you when you want to write about? Karen and Stephanie, can you answer that one? How do you get your inspiration?
Usually while I'm working on another book and I'm not thinking about the next book. I mean, it's when I'm doing stupid stuff like folding laundry or taking a shower. A character will pop into my head, or and I will say, because I'm crazy, I love true crime. Another thing, I follow lots of YouTubers do cemetery, they look at gravestones and stuff and they do research of just regular people who have died in maybe extraordinary ways. I get so much from that. Call me morbid, but that's who I am.
I think for me, whenever I am on a deadline and absolutely should not be working on a new story, that is when the muse decides that it's time to come up with new ideas. And it's sort of like Clippy in your head pops up, says, I see you're writing a story. Would you like to write another story?
Remember Clippy? Oh my gosh. But they say that your brain is at its most creative when it's at its most exhausted. And I think, and that's why, when I finally force myself into the shower or to fold the laundry is when I've been writing all day and I am shredded. And that is when, and you're, finishing your book, you're on deadline. That's when your brain is the most tired. And I think that's when these ideas decide to pop into our heads.
Wow. Yeah. Jackie would like to know I have a secret crush on Lafayette and love researching him. Have you researched and fell secretly in love with any of your characters, or was there someone you have researched that has changed your opinion after you found out more about that person? Interesting.
A lot. That happens to me a lot. I think Mr. Short from America's First Daughter was a surprise historical figure. I did not know about this unsung founding father who was quite a looker in his day and a good guy. So I did have a crush on him, but I have to share him with Laura. So Lafayette is all mine, though. I had a crush on him almost from the first time he appeared in America's First Daughter, and he kept stealing scenes in that book all the way to the end. And then in My Dear Hamilton, he stole every scene he was in there. And so the more I learned about him, he's one of the really unusual historical figures that you learn more good than bad. He tried and failed at more things than most people will ever attempt, and accomplished things that no one else could. And that's a paraphrase of his biographer. I don't attribute that to me, but I was always moved by that.
It's very true. And
How about you, Karen?
So my father was always a fan of Winston Churchill. And when we lived in London, it was all about Winston Churchill. My dad actually for Christmas one year wanted by Winston Churchill's memoirs, which are like a 12 set volume. And, he would read those out loud in the evening to us. So I would just kind of listen, sort of. I wasn't into history. I mean, I was into history, but not like I am now. And then when I was writing The Last Night in London, I really, and I read his papers, and I learned what he did and how he, my gosh, he was, and I read Last Hope Island by
Lynn
Olson. Yeah. Oh my gosh. He was a very peculiar character. So what a mind, what a brain, what an incredible human being. His whole bath escapades and how much he drank and everything was really, and his just witticisms. But this man saved the world. He really and truly did. He was just, he knew who to talk to. He knew how to get it done, and he did it. And he was this little fat. He was very hot when he was younger, by the way. By World War II, he was very rotund, cigar smoker, which my husband is. And I think that's the only reason why I put up with it, because Winston did it.
So, what is one thing, or if you can't think of one, what is something that is changed in your writing during this pandemic? Have you changed anything with, the way you write or how often you write? Is it harder? Both of you.
So for me, I think the main thing that has changed is that I haven't been able to write with my writer friends. We used to meet up at Panera Bread all the time and write together. There's a crew of us in Maryland, pardon me. And when Karen comes to visit, we're going to have to take her out to hopefully someplace nicer than Panera Bread. But
I like Panera.
So we haven't been able to do that. And but mostly my writing day is all about being chained to my desk in my office, and not much has changed about that during the pandemic, except that my husband is now home.
Yeah, that's become a problem.
He is a big help.
See, my husband's a banker, and he's on the phone all the time. And luckily, we do have a beach house in Florida, so I've been spending much of the pandemic there. But and it's funny because like Stephanie, I wouldn't have noticed really, except for my husband being here more and hearing him. It's like I hear you breathing, and it's a big house, but I know he's here, and I can hear him. But so I've been escaping to the house in Florida, but. What happened, right before pandemic is I inherited my parents and their care. And so that has I have barely even noticed that there was a pandemic because I've just been dealing with so much. And so I have to say that my brain has been hijacked by other things. And, it has taken me 4 months to write 3 chapters. Now, again, I've been working on and that's the thing with the collaboration. It does, you don't want to sit on that chapter because that your writing partners are waiting for it. So I'm a lot quicker with those. But it's been very slow going. And I kind of postponed a contract because I just don't know when I'm going to be able to turn in that next book. I'm working on a book now, but I just don't know what's next because life is just very hard for me right now. So.
Well,
I love to read. So thank you again, Stephanie. Thank you.
Well, and what's next is April 20th. You have your book coming out. Do you want to give them a little heads up and give a sneak peek of what it's about?
Yeah, just a quickie. So it's not a sequel, but for those of you who are fans of the collaborations, there is a character from All the Ways We Said Goodbye, Precious Dubose, who we see in All the Ways We Said Goodbye in 1964. And we get to see her in modern day. She's turning 100. and a freelance journalist has been hired to tell her story. So Precious has donated all of her beautiful clothes from when she was a model in France and England during the Blitz and after to the London Fashion Museum. And the editor of Vogue, who is a friend of Maddie Warner. Now, Maddie Warner, again, this isn't a sequel, but Maddie Warner is a character from two of my older books, taking place, very Southern fiction, Falling Home and After the Rain. And Maddie is 14 and Falling Home and 18 and After the Rain. And I've been getting so much reader mail since that last book came out. What happened to Maddie Warner? She was a favorite secondary character. So I've made her a young woman of 28. She's a freelance journalist, and she has been hired by her friend from junior year abroad at Oxford, who is now an editor at Vogue, to write this story, this interview with Precious Dubose, the famous model, about fashion in a time of crisis, to be published in conjunction with this lovely show of Precious's clothes. And Maddie thinks this is very straightforward. Of course, I'll come do it. So she comes to interview Precious, and of course, it's not as straightforward as she thinks, because both of them force the other to start peeling away those layers of the past and secrets and grief that they have both held close. But what's so special about this book, and it is my most personal book yet, because the setting of the book is Harley House, which is a beautiful Edwardian building on Regent's Park, where I personally lived in for 7 years in the 80s. And this is where both the Blitz portion happens and the modern day portion happens. And it all came to pass because the day I moved into that flat, the porter told me that the reason why half the windows in my flat were plain glass and the other half were this gorgeous leaded glass was because during the Blitz, they had been shattered. And so the whole time I lived there, I wasn't a writer, but I just couldn't stop imagining the lives of the people who had lived in that building during times of crisis. So that's the story of the Last Night in London.
We're very excited. Can't wait for it to come out.
Thank you.
And now we have the numbers here. So Stephanie, I need a number between 1 and 171.
121.
Hey, Janet Pinto. So Janet Pinto has won Stephanie's books as well as Karen's new pre-release. So Janet, I will try to get a hold of you, but please reach out to me too and give me your information so we can get them all shipped out to you. And this has been a wonderful evening. Thank you both so much. Stephanie, we are so excited. This is a fabulous book. It is on our staff picks already.
Yes.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
5 stars for me. Y'all get this book. This is what you need if you're going through crisis in your life. This will take you out of it. Like, I'm not going to complain about anything in my life because I know what people have gone through. So
it's fabulous.
It's gorgeous read, Stephanie.
Thank you so much.
And
I hope you all have it already. If you order it from us, you either have it or it's on its way. And make sure you order Karen's book as well. So thank you all and thanks for coming next year. Let's do it in person, please.
Yes.
Come see us.
Vaccines, y'all.
Yeah. Thank you very much and good night, everybody.
Good night. Congrats, Stephanie.